Welcome back to another reading and correcting of Stepping Up, Book 2 in the Dungeon Runners series. By me, Kedar, the Tiger Writes, and Ty, the Tiger's Supervisor. This morning we are doing Chapter 9, and of course I didn't adjust it. Alrighty. Instead of using water to dry himself, Tibs used fire. He'd used most of his water essence surviving, and he needed practice for the other ones. He brought it to the surface, and the water steamed away. Once he and the clothes in his clothes were dry, he absorbed the essence back. This hadn't cost him any, and he absorbed the essence back. This hadn't cost him any, and stepped to the edge of the pool. The surface was jagged field and broken ice. Now that the stone pillars were down again. I guess this means there's no safe way across anymore, Chico said, while Tibs pulled water essence from the ice pool to refill his reserve and amulet. Unless I deactivate the traps. Tibs nodded to the wall. He could just make out the edge of the essence maze there. Is it worth it? Mez asked. You made the ice because it was simple. The bridge isn't that difficult. Unless the dungeon has changed that too. Pito stepped onto the bridge. What I am able to feel of this trigger and the next one seems to be unchanged. Tibs felt Jacob's gaze as he finished refilling his reserve. He isn't talking, other than to encourage us or mock us. He doesn't talk about the room or how we set them up. I don't. Still stop. Okay. I do mock you once in a while, but there are times your team deserves it. No, we don't. Stiff stood. You're just evil. He saw the way the others looked at him and hurried to add, I'm not serious. As the only one who heard Stowe, he needed to remember the others took his comments about the dungeon seriously. How about we keep going, loot, and all that? The others headed through the exit, and Tibs didn't move. He swallowed. Vision of the massacre he ran through when chasing Barty is different now than before. His throat constricted. Pain filled him. He ate him alive. Corruption wouldn't leave anything of him, as it turned his own essence against him. He jumped at a hand on his shoulder. Tibs? Karina asked gently. I'm okay, he hurried to reply, and forced his breathing to slow. The pain was only a memory. He'd already lived through it, survived corruption. This is too hard. I'm fine, he snapped. Sorry. She nodded, forced himself to walk to the other room, and she stayed with him. No obvious changes here, Jekyll said of the 5 whipper and dozen stone rats. Let's stay on our guards for any surprises the dungeon might have added, but otherwise we know how to do this. Tibs nodded and took out his knife. It was quicker than the last time they fought, and this time they only had small cuts and bruises by the time everything was destroyed. No one needed his help, and he was glad for it. His help, the Jekyll had left the fighter. After how? His help to the fighter. Yeah, this feels clunky. After how his help to Jekyll had left the fighter, he'd rather not risk using his corrupted essence on his friends. How his help to Jekyll. After how his help to Jekyll had left the fighter. That's that, but that's probably the editor's probably going to have to tell me what's wrong. Like, I can't figure out, it feels off, but I can't figure out why. Tibs, Jekyll called, lobbing an amulet at him. You're in luck. Mess pulled another one from the rubble. This makes a full set. Stow, Granny said, and edged to her voice while Tibs added the 2 amulets to his pouch. 3-in-1 run. That 3-in-1 run was a first. Hey, Kenny! I didn't notice you returning. How's the work going? It's going, but don't change the subject. We need to have a talk. But they're heading to the rattling camp. If they survive this run, you can watch them the next time. But now, Stowe. The sternness in her voice was new, too. I was wondering what the coming scolding was about. The dungeon's going to be busy for a while, he told the others as they exited the room. Meaning? Kirina asked. He looked at Jekyll. Pleading with him for more loot isn't going to do anything. Does it ever? Jekyll Mez asked. I don't plead. Jekyll said I asked. May I suggest working on the tone in your voice when you do so, then? Kondar said. There has been a definite edge of pleading in it the previous times. I don't, you know what? I'm not falling for this. There will be loot, and I will not plead. The changes to the encampment were small. The fires no longer had the same number of tents around them, ranging from 3 to 7. They were also no longer identical, each having different adornment or were made of different material. The tents no longer looked like they were made of stone, but Tibs identified. Tibs identified leather and fabric, as well as colors added to them in design Tibs didn't recognize, as if the Ratlings had decorated their home. Had they done so? Or had Stowe placed everything? The dungeon said everything within him was there by his design, but this felt alive. The difference didn't extend to the Ratlings. They were still stone, and fighting them was much the same. Karina and Tibs went around the edge, clearing the tents, and moved inward, while Jekyll and Commodore and Mez headed for the center, attracting the bulk of the attention. By the time this room was cleared, the only serious injury was Mez's broken arm. Don't worry about it, the archer said as Tibs hesitated to use his essence to create the splint and bring the bones back into line. Once relieved, the cleric will heal me. I'll take care of that too. Tibs had explained what had happened to Jekyll after he'd helped him, but Mez wasn't impressed. Look, I can't use my bow with a broken arm. If I get sick because of it, I'll have the time to get over it. It's probably going to be a month before our next run. Tibs tried to keep the corruption from moving into Mez with his essence, but as always, it didn't obey him. Well, that was fun, Stowe grumbled as Tibs searched the tents for chests. What did Granny want? To complain that I'm breaking the rules. What else would it be? Don't think I didn't see you change the list of drops from the whippers, she scolded. Of course I made change, he replied, slightly exasperated. I'm always making adjustment to how things work. Why was this time deserving of a I'm cheating talk? Because you added more amulets to the drop list. They're the cheapest and easiest of the magical item I can put in. Of course I added them. And it just happens Tibs got 3 of them? That was random. There are plenty of other things on the list for them. Was it? She asked. Had it been? Stowe could affect what was in the chest, but not while they were in the room. That was how he'd arranged for Mez to get his bow, after Tibs suggested it while they were in the previous room. She's impossible, Stowe grumbled. I take it she left. Tibs didn't know what Ganymede was. She seemed to act as Stowe's guardian and assistant. She knew more than he did, and she made sure he followed the rules, so there wouldn't be repercussion. Who would enforce the rule? Who would enforce them? She didn't stay, and Stowe didn't seem to believe there was anyone to do so. There had been hints she could leave, but that still couldn't be left unattended. She's gone back to work on the 3rd floor. So did you? Tibs cleared another tent. This one had been arranged as a tannery, but didn't have the smells the tannery in town created. They had been talk of getting it moved closer to the corruption pool, since they both stank, but the tanner wouldn't have it, and the guild refused to get involved in in-town disputes. Did I what? Still demanded, a hint of anger in his voice. Affect the loot? Of course not. Anger was turned into indignation, and Tibs moved to the next tent. This one had a cooking pot, and it was the 3rd such tent he'd entered. All were identical in how they were laid out, with only the materials being used different. Like in the others, in the previous times Tibs had been in one, the pot was empty. Couldn't help but the shudder as he remembered the rattling on his back, the clawed hand coming at his face. Why did they talk like you needed more amulets? Stowe asked. For my essences. My reserves are so small I can't do anything with them. With the amulets, I'll be able to train and use them the way those with them do. Why aren't you filling them now? Tibs touched the pouch. Because if I use them now, the guild's going to force me to keep them. I don't want the team to have to give up an item that will be more useful to us just because I'm forced to keep the amulet. I thought we got to keep all the loot. He adjusted where he thought the limits of Still's awareness was. The tables where the guild looked over the items were at the side of the waiting area. If he made a straight line from where he knew Stu could perceive, since he'd spoken to Tibs there, those should have been included. This tent had only bedrolls and a chest. Everything we take out of here belongs to the guild. Took the leather boots out, well-made ones, but normal. We have to pay for what we want to keep. Stu snorted. I made the loot. It's mine. I get to say who gets it, and you do. Tibs smiled, exiting the tent. They aren't going to believe me if I tell them that, and if they did, thought of Larry and how he always knew when someone lied to him because his element was light, then I'm going to have to explain how it is you can talk and that I can hear you. Neither one of us wants that. So you really could use a pouch of hiding then. Tip shrugged. Yeah, but you said it was too costly to make. You saved my life. I can sacrifice a little. Well, can you let you make it? She can't stop me, he snapped inside. But she can yell at me. I don't like making her angry. This tent was the last in his quarter of the camp, so he rejoined the others. Nothing enchanted this time, so more they'd be able to keep. Let's feel. The guild only kept unenchanted armors and weapons. Anything else? Useless. The guild only kept anything else out. Moving through it considered useless. He looked at the boots before placing them down. Would those be armor or clothing? He couldn't tell. Among the clothing there were a bow and a short sword. He picked it up. It was heavier than he remembered the one Bardic had gotten him to hold. Jeez. It was heavy. He picked it up, and it was heavier than he remembered the one Bardic had gotten him to hold had been. He used earth to strengthen his arm, then it was easier to wield. Planning on switching weapons? Miss asked, chuckling. Yes. He swung it and was pulled off balance. The archer caught him before he fell. Thanks. I'm no good at throwing knives, and I'm tired of how close those rats have to be before I can stab them. He looked at the blade. I don't think I'm the kind of rogue who sneaks around and plants knives in people's back. That was the kind of rogue Bardic had been, even if the knife had been figurative, and the corruption only on him because Tibs had run to catch it. And we love you for that. Is this a good sword? He asked the fighter. It isn't good quality, Stowe answered as Jackal shrugged. Those aren't my thing. The fighter closed his fist. These are my weapons. Tibs chuckled. I'd have to let the rats get even closer. If I used my fist, he shuddered, putting the sword back with the rest. Can you even get training? Serena asked. Fighters are the one who get trained with swords. Use enough coins, Jekyll said, and everyone says yes. eventually. Is the dungeon back? Jekyll asked, and Tibs nodded. What's with the junk? An entire camp of rattling, and this is all we get? That isn't junk, Stowe replied, offended. He's just pleading for better stuff. I am not pleading. There's definitely some whining in there. Karina chuckled. That makes it pleading. Don't you want better stuff? Jekyll asked. Of course I do, but it isn't junk just because it isn't as good as you want. The guild will let us keep most of it, so that's money for us. Money we can use to buy whatever we need that doesn't show up in the loot we find. What do you need? Tibs asked, relaying Stowe's question, then wondering why the dungeon was interested. Karina fingered the cut in her robe. This time I look for a better one. This was one. Sword swipe from a rattling, and the creatures are only going to get harder as we go further. I'm going to ask Darren if he can get me a robe like the one you had, Commodore. With armor in it. The clerk nodded, putting the item that fit in Jekyll's backpack. That should not be a problem for him. I purchased mine from an armorer in Verdun, but I have seen the like in stores catering to sorcerers. Those were sorcerers' robe? Mez asked. The cleric smiled. Of course. Cleric's robe only come in white. This concludes Chapter 9 of Stepping Up. If you enjoyed this, please give it a like. Subscribe, hit the bell to know when the next one's going to be. Share with your friends and strangers so more people can enjoy this. If you want to read Book 1 and this one, it's posted for free on Royal Road. If you want to read ahead, you can do so on my Patreon. The links are in the notes, as well as my Twitch, where I do this live every Tuesday, 8 a.m. Eastern Time. And the rest of the week, I write other stuff. Well, this and other stuff. And with that, I shall wish you a good day.